Senator Fierravanti-Wells.
Thank you, Madam Acting Deputy President. Over the years, I have been consistent in my strident criticisms of the decision to lease the Port of Darwin to Landbridge. How can one of our most strategic assets in Northern Australia be leased to a company with ties to the Communist Party in Beijing? There have been long concerns about the decision, attributed to the surveillance and espionage capabilities presented by the port's close proximity to Australian and US defence facilities, as well as concerns about the strategic purpose of China's investment in the region as part of its maritime Silk Road. I know many Australians who have contacted me do not agree respectfully with the Defence Minister's comments on 9 September that there are no security concerns regarding the Port of Darwin. How can this not be a matter of concern? Indeed, I have to say after the events of this week, I envisage that there will be renewed focus on the Port of Darwin and it will become very much symbolic of our political fortitude to stand up to the bullying tactics of the CCP. I think it's important to highlight some of the aspects that the decision on the Port of Darwin, and they remain perplexing to this day. And I know that after its win in August 2012, the CLP started exploring the privatisation of assets, including the port. There was a process that there were 33 investors, including Australian and European companies, that expressed an interest, including Landbridge. Media reports indicated at the time that Landbridge was a subsidiary of the Shandong Landbridge Group, a private company, and that its 2013 billionaire owner, Yi Chung, was named by the Chinese government as one of the top 10 individuals caring about the development of national defence. Shandong was found to have extensive links to the CCP and the PLA. Indeed, in an interview in Beijing in 2016, Mr Yi stated that the Darwin port investment fits his company's strategy to expand its shipping and energy interests and serve China's foreign policy goal of One Belt, One Road. Now, in February 2015, the Northern Territory Assembly appointed the Port of Darwin Select Committee. That committee went through a process and the evidence from that committee also indicated that the federal government had advised the Northern Territory government that the port was better privatised than continuing in government hands. Now, one of the key recommendations in its April 2015 report was that an Australian entity control the lease and that there be FIRB and defence consultations regarding the strategic and security risks of a potential international investor. Now, on 14 September, FIRB contacted Landbridge, indicating that the lease was outside the purview of FIRB review because of a technicality that assets owned by state, territory and local governments were exempt from FIRB scrutiny. To this day, that remains the case, although the exception has been modified to some extent, but it still remains an issue, and I think that that's something that we should be looking at. But in any case, on the 13th of October, Chief Minister Giles announced the 99-year lease valued at $506 million. Now, the lease process does raise some legitimate questions as to why, given the lead time to this decision, more effort wasn't made by those in key federal positions and those advising them to remove the foreign investment exemption, given the national security implications of allowing such a critical asset to be handed over to an entity with such known ties to the CCP and the PLA. Now, we do know that at the time the Abbott government was very keen to ensure that a free trade agreement was entered into with China, and indeed the Chinese president on the 17th of November addressed a joint sitting, and the day after, the FTA was announced by Trade Minister Rob, $18 billion, and indeed subsequent to that, Rob did leave and became he took on a job with Landbridge, $880,000. I will leave it at there, but those questions still remain open. Now, in its report, after the decision, the Senate Economics References Committee examined a number of issues pertinent to the decision and in particular made recommendations regarding that exemption. Peter Jennings and others, Neil James, also gave evidence. They were very, very critical of the decision, and indeed, as Peter Jennings said, we would now have to have our national security interests balanced against the reality of operating out of a harbour run by a company whose website proclaims it is contributing its best to realise the great rejuvenation of the Chinese dream. Now, Neil James, there were at the time different offers, and indeed an ABC report of 12 March 2019 goes back and looks at some of these offers, and the understanding was, cited, and that article reflects that whilst Landbridge was the highest, the best offer, nevertheless there were the second and third offers were very close there too. And so, as Neil James, if Landbridge's said, if Landbridge's offer was the best offer, but it introduced a major element of strategic risk for the whole country, they should have had the common sense to realise that they take the second best offer or the third best offer and not have any strategic risk. Now, as I said, I have been consistent on this issue, but also on my criticisms of predatory actions by totalitarian regimes and their state-owned entities on various issues, in particular about the acquisition of strategic assets. I have advocated for a major overhaul of critical infrastructure legislation, including retaking the Port of Darwin. And there is absolutely no doubt, as the Minister said, that were the lease of the port to be considered today, it would be subject to FIRB rules. But I also believe that because the exemption has now been modified, most likely it would be rejected by the Treasurer. However, I am disappointed that the foreign investment changes proposed by the Treasurer, which we will probably be debating shortly in this place, will not allow a retrospective consideration of the port decision. So that possibility under FIRB rules is not going to be possible. Now, regardless of why the lease was signed, there are cogent national security imperatives as to why consideration should be given to breaking of the lease. Now, it's obvious from the Northern Territory submission to these bills that there is some contemplation of a reacquisition. However, I did put specific questions to Northern Territory Chief Minister Gunner, which weren't responded to, and they very much went to this issue. And it would have been useful to have Mr Gunner give evidence or at least provide responses to those questions so that we could explore the very issues. And the only way that we're going to explore these issues is with information from the Northern Territory government. So I say to those opposite, a better course of action here would be to seek the cooperation of the Northern Territory government to provide. They have been reluctant in relation to releasing these documents, and I would urge those opposite that a better course of action, rather than getting another report here, as is requested, is to urge the Northern Territory government to release those documents so that we can make a comprehensive assessment. So, therefore, I mean, the Minister has answered in the committee stage to the questions that are the very questions that are raised in this amendment. This amendment also raises technical issues, that it's not just actions in the purview of the Minister, the Foreign Minister, but it's actually action in the purview of other ministers, including the Treasurer, that will be required to take action. And so there is, I believe, a technical problem with this amendment. Now, I won't repeat my concerns about this bill, which I outlined in the second reading speech. Suffice to say that I believe that this amendment will not lead to any report. I believe that would be useful. I think that it is a futile exercise because we already know the outcome, and the outcome is that there will not be a retaking of the Port of Darwin under this legislation. Now, as I have said, there are other opportunities, and I believe that I have been advised that there are circumstances which may provide cause for the lease to be broken, including a failure by the port operator to meet legislative requirements if the company were to become insolvent, failure to meet defence access requirements, and in the event that defence powers are exercised.